All right, we are live. It's August 4th, Social Selling Hour, lucky number 13. This is our 13th.
Oh, that's the
So-
reason why.
yes. Barbara, you got
Had some
lucky
technical
13.
difficulties.
Yeah, Google Plus decided to play some tricks on us here to start it off, but we're excited to have everybody joining us on Twitter as well as the Google Plus Hangout today. We are honored to have a special guest, Barbara, here with us here today, and we're going to kind of walk through a couple different things as far as social selling, kind of hot button topics, as well as kind of the experience economy. So get us kick-started. Barbara, if you could go ahead and just kind of introduce yourself and give us a little background, and then we'll kind of jump into question number one.
Sure. Thanks, Brian and Rachel, for having me here. This is great. Now I know, lucky number 13. That's the reason why things didn't want to work. But the great news about being at this time is that in my day, way back when, we didn't have all these devices. So how cool is it that I was able to switch devices really quickly? So I am Barb Giamonco. I own a company called Social Centered Selling, and I'm the co-author of a book called The New Handshake, Sales Meets Social Media. I am probably one of the first to get really passionate about using social media for sales. I can tell you that 8-9 years ago when I started evangelizing this, people thought I was pretty nuts, and maybe not so much today. Also passionate about animals, and so my puppy, Miss Lily, she's here in the office, and she may decide to make an appearance during our session.
All right, I have a little dog running around here as well, named Keela. So if she might run around, and you never know, if I have two young daughters home too. So we might have an entertaining social selling hour
Well,
here.
that's what community is all about.
That's true. I think Rachel has a little one there as well today too, right?
That's right. I was gonna say, yeah, I don't no pets, but I do have a toddler, so she
Okay.
might pop in.
All right. Well, glad to have you, Barbara, on our social selling hour, and it's kind of like the perfect combination here since the Twitter chat. This is our 13th one, and we've been kind of growing and kind of learning as we go as well. And the kind of the neat part of social selling is I think each week it changes as well as it kind of goes back to some of the basics. So it's kind of a great thing to kind of kick off our first question here. We have there's a lot of noise surrounding social selling. So why is that? I guess I mean, I think it went from a buzzword to something that people really kind of embraced, and I think you've probably seen that trend more than anyone else since you kind of got in at the ground floor.
Right. So what's interesting is even as far back as, say, 18 months to 24 months, which seems like a long period of time, but it's not really that long ago, we didn't have the multitude of experts that we have today in social selling. And I think, like any terminology, it starts to catch on. People realize it's sort of hot. And Brian, it's fair to say that a fair number of people are trying to capitalize on the term because it's a hot SEO term, right? So I think what that's done is because now you have marketers mixing in, and you've got salespeople mixing in, and you have vendors who have products that don't really even fit what I would consider social selling per se. I think it's created some confusion for those folks who are going to be the buyers of social selling strategy, training and coaching and support. And so that's why I say there's a lot of noise, because everybody has an opinion. Many of the folks are simply regurgitating what other people have been saying for a number of years and trying to put their own spin on it. And I get that, but I do think it confuses the people who are going to buy the service.
Yeah, I think that's probably a trend across a lot of social change. So many things are changing, and when someone sees the change is actually taking off and getting some legs, I think it seems that we have those ones that like to jump on the buzzword or the trend, or
That's right.
or add ninja or whatever they want to their title and say that they're experts in this field, or even if they've quote unquote been successful once or twice, think considering that is the the master of their domain. So that's I think as we learn more of really how to make this work, I think we're all kind of learning together, which is really why Rachel and I kind of formed this chat to begin with. Is we wanted a collaborative group to learn from the experts and kind of be able to filter the noise. Is what I like to always be able to tell the difference between those that are claiming they're doing these things and those that are actually doing it. So I think that's a kind of a good foundation of where we're at today for social selling. And then question number 2, we have what are the elements needed to drive revenue and pipeline through a social selling approach?
Well, I think actually what you just spoke to is really important, Brian, which is how does somebody know who's really got the goods and who doesn't. So it's a perfect lead-in with the question, because I've always advocated, like any business process, and certainly that's true in selling, you need, and especially as you're thinking about social, because what I like to say is that it isn't just the technology, it's really kind of this shift in thinking and attitude and kind of approach and how you engage and talk to people and get involved in conversations. For example, this is a perfect example. This is still very frightening to a lot of salespeople to try and engage with a potential customer or even a current customer. And so you have to have a strategy. That's number one. So I advocate three things. Have a strategy. It can be a plan of attack that's 3, 6, 9 months, these few things you want to accomplish, but you have to plan for this. You need to target the audience appropriately. As you both well know, this becomes really critical when you need to find people in the online space and engage with them, right? I sell B2B primarily, so I spend a ton of time over on LinkedIn and a lot on Twitter. Not so much on Facebook, except for, personal and friends, though I have presence for the business. So that's the first thing. What's the plan of attack? What are you trying to accomplish? How are you going to measure? Okay, and I really do mean measure, because what a sales VP cares about is revenue. So if it's about revenue, you better be able to demonstrate that you're using social to drive more meetings that are leading to close more quickly. So that's the first thing. Number two is I say you've got to get the training. It's the skills. Learn how to use the technology and learn how to use it well. And to any of the sales VPs who are listening in, I would say to them, invest in training for your people. Don't think that they can figure it out by clicking around and floundering around. That's not going to be advantageous to your business. And then the third thing, Brian, is you need to execute well. So how many times have you seen people put up a LinkedIn profile and you can tell they've done nothing for the past 2 years, right?
Yep, I call that lazy social. Whenever they throw it up and say they're social, yet they haven't updated, or they have a profile picture that they copied and pasted from their Facebook profile from college or something.
That's right. And by the way, that's another way that you can tell an expert, because surprisingly enough, there are a fair number of people who claim to have expertise, and you go look at their social presence and it's just abysmal, right? It's just, you just look at it and you say, oh, give me a break. The other thing that I would say is when you're trying to qualify somebody who's got the expertise you're looking for, I'm sorry, pardon me, but may I just say that if it's social selling, you probably should have sales experience.
Yeah.
Right? I'm kind of a stickler for that. So, that's one of the reasons why I've been successful with my company and my business, because people know I've sold, I've run sales teams in enterprise businesses, I've got the background. Now, can you learn it? Of course. But I tell you, if you want a sales VP to take you as somebody who's credible, you better have the background, you better have carried a bag and have lived by a quota.
No, I think I think all three of those are. I think we could probably have an individual chat on each one of those topics. I think you hit lots of home runs. I came from a lot of my past was training, so I applaud. And anytime someone that understands that, with as much change and as much technology as we are now embracing, we can't, there's no excuse not to train our not only our teams but ourselves, and really a lot of it ends up being learning as you go, and creating a strategy that's agile enough to embrace that. And the last point of not having a digital footprint or not having experience, crappy offline is going to be crappy online for all intensive purposes. And I think I stirred up a little bit of trouble on a recent blog post because I said that no one should be speaking at a live event without a digital footprint, because I was amazed how many times someone would Google someone that's presenting even on digital, but they would presenting on something that they want to inspire and lead other people on, and yet you'd go to Google it to find out more, to continue the inspiration, and they wouldn't even have a LinkedIn page or not even have any kind of online presence. And I think that goes a long way with kind of what you're saying there, from just from those three tips: strategy, training, and execute. I think far too often they do one or maybe two of those three. And then if it fails, they blame social selling, and they say, okay, it's because I could never prove to my boss that staring at my Twitter timeline all day was really my job. and unfortunately, we know that it's a lot more than that. But I think those are three home run points for sure. And Like I guess one of the questions that I first thought of when you think of training, are most of the sales organizations looking for formalized training across from like the entire team together? Or is this more one-off training? Where does the social selling training kind of start or kind of look like today?
Well, if you've been involved in training for any length of time, and I have for 11 years in my business, and then prior to that I created programs as a side job as I was managing teams at Microsoft. Here's what I found, Brian. Even today, it really surprises me how many organizations treat training as an event. Okay, so I really, what we've tried to do in my company is really take that strategic approach and do some planning with them and really customize and develop the right kind of program, and then incorporate months, 6, 8 months of staying engaged and coaching them to ensure that the learning is really going to stick. Unfortunately, what I see happen a lot is that, an organization, if they're going to make an investment in training, usually the first thing they're going to do is they're going to invite somebody to come and perhaps speak at a sales meeting. And oh, by the way, can you come in, Barb, and train everybody on LinkedIn in 1 hour so they can be perfect at social selling?
Yes.
Well, guess what? No, I cannot. I can come in and I can tell you in an hour all the reasons why you need to be using social, but to really give you the depth of learning and development, no. I would also say to the individual contributor, if your organization is not investing in your training, then go pay for it yourself. Because even though my companies would invest in my training when I was still in corporate, I bought books, and that's back in the day when we had audio tapes, and I would go buy all kinds of training and go pay for my own training, and I believe that anybody who is a superstar salesperson continues to do that today, and even in my own business, every single day I'm finding ways to learn something new. So what I hope, Brian, is that we can get to a point where organizations stop treating training as a cost, right? And they treat it as an investment in the health and success of the business.
I think that's a home run. I think, unfortunately, they too often brands and leaders talk about culture, training, and employee engagement, and that usually either stops, at week 3 of the employee, or they forget that those are things that all 3 of those elements are things that we have to not only continue but invest in. And it's not an event. I love that. I can't tell you how many times I preach that at different things, being especially being a one-off. Today, change. By the time you learn a tool or you're using one of the a CRM solution, by the time you master the solution, there's other tools that can plug into it, or there's other aspects, and really embracing the entire solution. And I like to say focus on the people first, and then the technology second. Even as someone that was a technology evangelist, I always felt that too often we were using tech to solve people problems instead of fixing the people problems with training and kind of engagement, and then integrating tech to be more productive. And I know Rachel has that kind of experience there with Pipeliner. From a sales perspective or a training perspective, Rachel, have you kind of seen some of the same aspects as Barb was talking about?
Definitely. And I think I've taken a similar approach where you can explain the philosophy and the reason why in an hour, but it takes many, many hours to actually train on the tools. But that's just part of the process. And then keeping abreast of the trends, which actually I was going to ask you and Barbara, because social selling is such a rapidly evolving space. How do you both stay abreast of the best tools and the new tactics?
Go ahead, Barbara, let you take that.
I follow people like you and Brian. But honestly, in all sincerity, I find smart people and I follow them. And and I've been fortunate that people who have a little less experience than me come to me for a little guidance and support. And and I'm happy. I mean, with the magic of Skype, I happily mentor people outside the country and give them a little guidance. But in all sincerity, I'm constantly reading everything that I can from people that I respect, and I try to read everything. And there are a lot of things that I'll end up reading that I just say, oh yeah, that's not something I'm going to pay attention to. But I really do, and this is one of the things that I love about social. We have a global library here. We have this global opportunity to tap into really smart people's minds. And so I do. I pay attention to other people like yourselves, and I listen and I say, oh, what tool are they? Oh, I never heard of that before. And I think, Rachel, you actually mentioned a tool in another chat. It might have been the Sales for Life chat, and I went immediately to check it out. It had something to do with images, as I recall, Canvas
Oh,
or
Canva.
Canva.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I said, oh my gosh, I've never heard of that. Now, I stay pretty abreast of technology because I love it, it's my business, but how could I possibly be aware of every cool tool out there? So that's my recommendation for people. Find the folks that you can really trust who are really dialed in and early adopters, and check out the tools and the strategies they're using. And, you know, I still think that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. When you decide to use a tool that Brian's using and you start to get success, I think that's really a great thing.
Yeah, I think, you know, I've always been, reverse mentoring is like a passion for mine, because I had a great boss right out of college just tell me, you know, kind of grab a hold of me and it's like, I will teach you business if you teach me technology. And it was a powerful thing. I grew faster than, you know, I'm thankful for him on a daily basis. Actually sent him an email this morning with some news that I had and said, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm, you know, becoming a better person still from the day that, you know, he embraced that I knew and was a geek for technology, and he was kind of, you know, reaching out that reverse mentor side and giving me so many things that I could only give back whatever I could geek myself onto, or tools that I could learn from. And I think that's partially really where we're at today. Like, you know, between Twitter chats and, you know, the quote that I love that I've kind of adopted now when I'm doing some of my things, you know, everyone says you need to know what you don't know. And for me, it's, if I know what I don't know, but I also have a team of people that know that stuff. And that's where it's really powerful, when you can have that alliance of people around you that know what you don't. And, you know, I think that's kind of, you know, a staple, Barbara, to what you're saying. And overall, everything that we're doing with, you know, social and tech, and, you know, I don't blame change. I embrace it, but at the same time, I have to find people that, you know, are ahead of the game and learning that way. And I think it kind of leads perfectly into question 3. You know, why is selling features the wrong way to go about selling? And
oh my gosh, we could have an entire tweet chat about that, because people don't buy features as the first thing. The second thing is that these days most buyers have already checked out the initial features, even and for some of my customers where these are enterprise sales reps selling complex B2B solutions, they want to argue that point, but the reality is their own company is putting masses of information and details about what the product does and the features and the benefits. So by the time you get to have that conversation with the person who's going to buy from you, if you just roll into the dog and pony show, you're done. They've already got the basics. So you need to, you know, people talk a lot about adding value. What does adding value mean? Well, I think at the end of the day, buyers are looking for people who have products and solutions that solve their business problems, period.
Amen.
Right?
Yes.
And then even going a little bit further than that, and I just wrote a post about this, the buyer doesn't always know what the problem is. I can tell you how many times I've sat in a sales meeting and I've called in because somebody says, you know what, our salespeople can't get access to decision makers. We think we need social selling. And I'll say, okay, well, let's talk about it. And as the conversation progressed, as it did with this one company, they said, yep, that's the problem, because every time the sales rep gets in the door, they close the sale. I said, really? Every time? Yep, they get in the door every time they close the sale. Well, you and I both know, I don't care how good you are, and I'm pretty good, but I haven't closed all of them, right? So I'm suspicious, and I ask more questions, and I say, well, how do you know that they're closing 100% of the time? Are you getting, you know, what's that percentage needing to closing the opportunity? And I said, are you getting that from your CRM? Well, you know, that's a really good question, Barb, because our sales reps are notoriously bad. They don't really track in CRM.
Of course.
So it went on from there. My point is, regardless of what the customer says the problem is, good salespeople today who are consultative will dig a little deeper to be sure. Right? And then the second thing is really speak to the problem. And I don't mean saying that, you know, your whatever has all these whiz bang. You really have to speak to the problem and how your organization is very well suited to support the strategy for helping them solve that. Kind of to your point earlier, Brian, I just see technology as sort of a byproduct of that. And I know it's going to freak some technology folks out there, but that's kind of the way I view it.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I usually, I joked that my title was technology evangelist, but I should have been change evangelist because so much of what I was doing was teaching change. And there's some great comments coming across Twitter, and a lot of people kind of agreeing with the training aspect. And I think that's a cry for help for all leaders that are out there, that the community itself understands and really wants training. And that also really goes to the buyer is smarter than often we want to give credit for. And if you're not investing in listening, and I play poker, and I always used to tell people, if you're really good at listening, you often hear what is not said. And
Yes.
In social selling, that seems to be such a great aspect, because like you said, not everyone will know what their problem is, but they'll know what they think it is. And by just the way oftentimes how they describe their problem, or like you said, wait, you're not recording this in your tool, but you have a 100% success rate. Oh yeah, we're just not recording 80% of the other stuff. There's so many other aspects to social listening, and I think listening and then also letting people know that they're heard, letting the customer know they're heard. Too often I think we take for granted that Google knows a lot of stuff, and if someone really wants to fact check you, they can go check Google and really figure out if it's the truth. So I think that's something that we kind of have to embrace, the training aspect, as well as understanding that buyers are smarter sometimes than we want to give them credit for.
You bet. I like to say validate, not interrogate.
Yeah, perfect. Yes.
Right?
Right? I think someone needs to make it to a Canva there on Twitter chat. So
validate, not interrogate. And I wrote that in a post for the Microsoft Dynamics team, because that's, even if you gather the information, you do the homework, which you absolutely should. You don't want to go in and just like you're reading off the stuff. Oh, I read about this and this and this. You want to use that to validate information and really have that really rich dynamic sales conversation. That takes a lot of skill. So when we think about training, the one thing that I want to just reinforce is that it doesn't matter how masterful we might be at training sales teams to use a social selling approach. If you get in front of the buyer and you default to 1980s selling, you still have a problem, right? So social is part of the process. It's not the process. You still have to have those great sales skills. And so you don't want to beat people over head with the information you found, but you do want to use it to try and validate. The other thing, Brian, as you well know, these buying decisions are made by multiple people inside an organization. Unless it's a tiny, tiny business, there's 3, 4, 5, 10, 12, 15 people, depending on the size of the organization. Guaranteed, they all think the problem you're trying to solve is different.
That's the truth. It is, and not only and it's funny because it's not even really the one that has the wallet or the purse to make the decisions. It's who they're listening to, right? So you have to understand, the person that believes they know what is out there, what is the smart side. And I think we've had a couple people kind of chime through on kind of more on the the technology side, where technology is a byproduct. I think a lot of that. I read a book. It's Human to Human by Brian Kramer. He uses the hashtag H2H, and it was one of those light bulbs for me where I started to remember that I love talking to people at an event. I love talking to people on Skype. I love talking on Twitter. And when it comes down to it, what's the common denominator? No matter what technology you're engaging is, it's people and people. Right? And it's amazing how often we blame technology, or we blame a tool, or we spend all this money researching and looking for the one tool, the easy button. And yet if we would have just focused on the people first, I think oftentimes that would solve a majority of the problems that you're attempting to kind of throw technology at. And one of the couple people I wanted to pull in a tweet that we had here. We had I guess Rachel is locked out of our Google Hangout, so Rachel will be manning the Twitter stream.
What happened?
I don't know. It's the 13th chat. 13th
I think that's it. That's what it is.
Yeah, and and I think one of the good points here is Andrew Jenkins on Twitter put out there. It's important to not only listen, but know where to listen and what to be listening for. I think that's. Do you have any tips or tricks for when someone's saying, what do I listen for, or where do I listen? When you first got into your conversation, I was loving it and smiling because you said, well, I'm focusing on B2B, so right now I'm on LinkedIn, and you kind of walked through, and I do that in my kind of training and implementation because I think it's important to know where your audience is, and also if you don't know who's on that audience, to kind of embrace that as well.
Well, so here's what's interesting. It doesn't matter what group I've spoken to over the years. I ask a group of people who sell something, and I say, somebody just describe for me your ideal buyer. And the answers will range, but usually the common theme is anyone who breathes, right? Anyone with a pulse is somebody who can buy.
Right.
Well, first of all, that's not true. Even if technically it were true, you can never get very much traction whether you're selling or marketing that way. So you have to really determine exactly what the characteristic of the ideal buyer is for you, because otherwise you'll just spend and waste a ton of time. For me, I know it's the ideal buyer is the VP of sales or the CMO, a mid-sized organization that got 100 salespeople or more. And by the way, technology and telecommunication companies are normally the ones I work with just because of my background. Being able to note that down, right? It goes back to our planning. Now you can determine which social sites are going to be the best for you. And by the way, you can break that down by industry as well. For example, government sellers don't have as much luck with LinkedIn, but they do if they use govloop.net, which is LinkedIn basically for government.
Right.
You know, I think it's so important, Brian, that we are clear who our buyer is, because we'll determine what platform, what groups, what's important to them. Then we can start paying attention to the trends. We can start to listen for the common themes that come out of these groups that they are participating in. And then you have the ability to really tailor the message. What makes me insanely crazy are the trainers running around who say, oh, you got to be on Pinterest. You've got to be on Pinterest. Well, I'm sorry. I sell to a vice president in a multi-million-dollar organization who I guarantee you is not using Pinterest. Now, why would I want to be there? Now, I have presence.
We all know every social channel has its own time. You know, it's a time suck no matter really where you're at. So, you know, finding your audience and then spending time where you can spend time with the most value is, you know, a major return.
Right. Now, I mean, in your business and my business, do I need to understand those platforms? Do I have presence there? Yes, because I'm able to counsel customers. Right. If you're retail, if you're involved in attracting women, if you are, you know, selling wedding cakes and hospitality, that stuff plays very, very well on Pinterest. Cars, those sorts of things. So that's, you know, to me, it always seems so basic, but unfortunately, so many people miss that, and then I think they flounder around on various platforms and then become frustrated and then come back to, you know, social selling doesn't work. Well, if you only use the one right platform and execute it well, it does work.
Yeah, and I think scale is often, you know, it's much like that term busy, where we like to use that as an excuse, but really it's, you know, we will spend time with what we feel is important. And, you know, as I'm coaching someone on a personal brand, I'm always like, okay, we have to get on LinkedIn, we're building the presence, and they're all ready to jump into Google Plus because they saw some, you know, Fox News special report that they need to be on there. And I was like, well, let's first figure out how you're even using LinkedIn, because, you know, and I think that's a telltale sign of, you know, understanding all of the options. And I'm a big fan of, I've been using the term upcycling content, and really just taking great content and making it specific for certain networks, as well as if you have a great blog post, make a slide share, make an infographic, rather than worrying about trying to make, you know, another subpar content. And I think part of that is really like LinkedIn. Too many people have great content, have great engagement, and then kind of eject from that, rather than, okay, LinkedIn does great with slide shares. The use of SlideShare for me has been amazing. And so if there's a great blog, I'm going to turn it right into SlideShare. And I like that term, upcycling, instead of recycling, because recycling kind of seems like we're taking the old and you know, not usable, but really we're taking the great used content and making, you know, giving it more life. And if it's posting an infographic on Pinterest, you know, that might influence someone that's influencing your influencer, that's a, you know, a valid you know, option. But I think you're right. There's so many. We get overwhelmed by trying to be everywhere a little bit rather than being one place really well.
Well, and you know, in the example that you just gave, Brian, that would be flushed out when you were planning, right? And so I think any time somebody in your organization or even somebody external who's an expert and says you must do this, I think you need to start asking a lot of questions. Tell me why. How does this fit our buyer? How does it fit with our current strategy and what we're already doing with content? Well, we need more resources to support it. You know, for example, it's very common for people to talk about LinkedIn and say, oh, you must start a group. Really? Maybe that makes sense, but do you have the resources and the time and the energy? And now that there are hundreds of thousands of groups, how will you stand out? What's your strategy for engaging people? And so I think it's very easy, again, to do the whole just get on the technology. But the technology, in my opinion, just enables what you're trying to do strategically. It's like gas in the car. I can put gas in my car without a map. I could be driving all over the place, and so it's obviously clear to you. That's why I'm so passionate about. Okay, let's put the technology to the side first. What are you really trying to get done, and why do you think it's this platform versus something else?
Yeah, and I think you hit a home run on that first spot where we were walking through strategy and training, and really if you don't have a strategy and align it with your business goals, and at the end of the day, if you can't prove what you're doing is worthwhile, I don't care how many LinkedIn groups or a showcase page or whatever you decided to create and try to embrace, you have to be able to prove some value as well as make your time worthwhile, and I think that's really kind of what we have to focus on. And I'll kind of jump into the next question there. Number 5, you were one of the first social selling evangelists. So why do you advocate that it's now time to move beyond just social selling?
Yes, one of my favorite questions. Here's why. Because for as long as I have been in sales, the conversation in the market has always been, we need to align sales and marketing. You probably heard this, right? We need to align sales and marketing. We've got to get out of the silos. And so I was so hopeful when social came into the picture, because if anything was what I would call sort of the overarching bridge in an organization, it's social. And so now I'm starting to become a little bit concerned that the conversations are, oh, you just need social selling. Oh, you just need social media marketing. Oh, you need to be on Twitter if you're the service department, but they don't have a strategy and nobody's talking to each other. So I feel like we need to start really starting to embrace the idea that I don't even know who first started talking about social business. I know Salesforce.com became kind of known for the term, but I think we need to help organizations start thinking like a social business. You can't have a social selling strategy without marketing's involvement, and I would offer that you can't have those two strategies without service being involved.
Yes.
Right. So I'm really about customer experience, and I think that experience starts from the very first touch point, whether it's an email from the marketer or the sales rep or the tweet or whatever it is, and it carries through all the way through the life cycle. But I don't think businesses are thinking this way. They're still trying to take social and make it a linear process. Yes. Versus really thinking through the strategy of what happens when opportunities come at you from multiple points in a line that's no longer linear. So that's why I think we have to stop just saying social selling. We've got to engage all the groups. And I know you do this in your business, I do it in mine. Doesn't matter if marketing brings me in, sales is engaged. Sales brings me in, marketing's engaged. And over the past 2 years, I started insisting that at least the service executives were part of the conversation also.
I love that. I implemented what I called at the time a dotted line culture, where it was social was a customer service, a sales, a marketing, and I can't tell you how many times I'd have someone from sales tell me they want feedback, they want feedback, they want feedback. Okay, let's go include customer service. No, we don't want to include them. And I was like, well, last time I checked, the guys that are talking to the community, that are listening, you don't want to. Okay. You don't really want to hear feedback. You just want someone to tell you what you want to hear, and I think that is often a problem. And I think that you made some really good points there. I even made the comment I'm gonna have to watch the Hangout again on the replay so I can take some notes on my side, because I think too often we don't even think of examples. Like, would we only give a telephone to the sales employees if they're the only ones that can talk to the outside? And if we're not investing in our internal community, our internal customers, which I consider the employees the first step, how could you even expect to kind of do that on the external? So I love that that element. It's beyond social selling. I end up joining lots of Twitter chats that are focused on human resources, and I love the one that Marcia Collier runs with customer service, because I learned so much on just kind of how they're engaging, what tools they're using. Because for me, if I want to be really good at what I'm doing on social, I need to know how all the touch points are kind of using. And I think I love that point. And I see Rachel is back from the social selling hour 13 curse. Is
Good Google abyss. I was like floating around and like, am I logged in? Am I not logged in?
Welcome back. Welcome back. So we'll jump into question 6. Why is experience the outcome that sellers should focus on?
Yeah, well, because it just tags onto what we were just talking about. Experience starts with the first, whatever it is, whether you meet somebody in person at a networking event, whether they hear you speak, whether it's an email that you send, that first in-mail. And I don't think sellers are thinking about this, and their sales leadership are not thinking enough about this, and I don't think marketing's thinking enough about this. Cranking out crappy emails is not helping your brand. And when you do that and you create an experience in a person's mind that says, oh my God, that is horrible, it doesn't suit me, it's not tailored to me, they clearly know nothing about my business, you've created a really poor experience. And I'll probably go off and tell people in my network about that experience. And so I don't think salespeople think enough about that. I do realize that partially management is at fault for always pushing them to chase new business. But you've got to think about, what is that experience like working with you from the first moment they talk to you or somebody in your company, and what was the sales process like? And typically what happens is a deal is closed and the salesperson forgets about the customer, and there's this assumption that they'll be there forever. So sellers really have to think, I think, a little bit bigger than just selling today's product to get to this month's quota. They have to think even bigger. It's not just chasing new business, but how will you continue to cultivate and make sure your current customers, who, by the way, are more important, in my opinion, are the ones that really stick with you. Ryan, I had to mention management, because I do understand that in many sales organizations, salespeople are being hounded to chase the new, and I don't think there's enough focus on managing the relationships you already have.
I agree. So, I had a really good boss a while back. He'd always in his office, he had this sign that said, who's keeping our lights on? And anytime someone would get into like this deep conversation about chasing like the big fish and all these things, he would come back and just point at that sign. And it's like, last time I checked, our paycheck is continuing to be cut because these people exist, and showing them that you care, showing them that they're repeat business. And too often, I think today, I can't tell you how many times we hear the word influencers, or let's create ambassadors or evangelists, and those are created and empowered by the existing customers, right? If we stop caring about that experience, I love that question, and I think it's one that we could expand on at a whole chat, because when we focus on the experience, it really does kind of change how the management, I'd say, records or grades or promotes sales from understanding, because too often I think if someone says they need to go do a business development deal with a potential client and take them out to dinner, they say yes, go for it. But if they said the same thing about an existing customer, I question if they would have the same support. And it's just like that with social. If I have reminders that go off on my calendar on a weekly and daily basis that'll say, check in on this person, and it's not because I think that they need checked in on, but I want them to know that I care and that they're still plugging along. And if it's just a simple me sending them a letter, I put letters from different companies and stuff that send stuff to me that just say, thank you for your business. I'm not adding on. I didn't buy a new feature, but they showed me that I care, and I'm happy to evangelize and be an ambassador for them. I think that's really important.
Well, and one of the worst grievances that I have a bone to pick about is these marketing automation systems that are queuing up messaging that are going to current customers with messages that clearly demonstrate they don't even know they're a customer.
Yes.
And that to me is just, can the offense get any bigger? I mean, you have these fancy marketing automation systems, and you don't know who your current customers are, and you're sending the same message to everybody. I find that offensive, and I imagine there are a lot of people who are customers who find that offensive. They're like, excuse me, I gave you $1 million this year. You don't even know who I am. So,
yeah, and I think we should feel the right to be offensive, that to cause a problem. Because, it's the same thing that someone tells me that we've been asking you for our feedback. And Chris Brogan gave this at a keynote, and I've used it all the time. He said if you're sending an email and you're asking for feedback, from the email is from do not reply, you're not asking for feedback, right? And that's the insult that you would hear, much like the insult that someone's trying to upsell you, or I'll get a nice LinkedIn in-mail, and I got it from a brand that I've been spending a lot of money with recently out of my own personal pocket, and the in-mail was like, Brian, I have a great tool to show you. I think you'd be a great person. I've been following you across your social channels. And so I took some screenshots of what I've posted about how much I like that tool and what I've been using it, and put it in there and said, apparently you're not following very well, because if you were listening to me, you would know that I use this tool.
There it is.
I always say I screenshot awesomeness for both firing back as well as proving value. So we'll kind of jump in number 7, which I think is kind of a great way to kind of jump off the last 10 minutes of the chat, is where do you see the future of business? As far as, I think there's so much change and so much things that even learning from this chat alone, where are we going today? And I don't even want to ask where we go a year from now. How about 6 months from now? Where do you see?
I really think that if in 6 months from now we would hear more people talking about and advocating and thinking about the experience of the customer life cycle from beginning to end, I would get very excited about that. And and I think that really has to include service. And the reason I say that is because there are a number of companies who are trying to do support online, and they're doing it very, very badly. I would also say that companies have to relook at a lot of their policies, and I would love to see more companies in the next 6 months pretend to be a customer and try to do business with their own organization. I'm sure it would be enlightening. So the future of business, I think, is exactly what we've been talking about, Brian. It is experience. It is getting back to the human element. It is, really thinking about and putting your head around what's important to the people on the other side of whatever it is that you are doing. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but it just came across my radar a couple of days ago, and it's been out there for, I guess, a few days longer than that. But have you heard about the Comcast call? And it's related to service.
I have.
All right. And I've had an experience like that with a company that I blogged about that made it so difficult for me to cancel that I was pissed, and I went out and I blogged. And so my understanding of this Comcast call, I haven't had a chance to listen to the whole thing, is that good for the service person that they were taught to really try and keep people from canceling, but this went way beyond.
It did.
Being a zealot. So I think if we're going to focus on the next 6 months, it's customer experience. And what does that feel like, whether it's sales, marketing, service? By the way, I see you've got Cheryl Burgess's book on your shelf, so I'll give her a shout out.
Ooh.
What does it feel like to do, work with your, what does it feel like to, I love the book. What is it, What does it feel like to do business with the accounting department? What does it feel like to do business with, the procurement group? I think companies have to really stop yakking the words, and they really got to start putting some strategies in place here, because there is, dare I say, a lot of competition in practically every industry. So that's my take.
And I love that. And there's so many interesting ways to go on there. I think, Rachel, you had something to jump in on there?
Yeah, I was just curious. So I know the struggle these days is to maintain that human element in scaling our social selling efforts, but it's hard. I know you talked about marketing automation. There are a lot of social selling automation tools that are coming available almost every day, it seems. So how do you recommend that people maintain that, the empathy and the humor and that personal approach when we're rapidly trying to scale our efforts to be competitive?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and honestly, I don't have a perfect answer. I think the person or company who comes up with the perfect answer is probably going to be the next Richard Branson. I think for myself personally, Rachel, I'm interested in scaling my business, but not at the heart of sacrificing being good to other people and being good, being a good human being. And so, I hope, and I know this is a Barb personal kind of thing. I hope we can get to a place where businesses spend less time obsessively focused on today's profits and start really thinking about how to get back and reconnect with the human element. I'm not going to say the name of the technology company here because it's widely known, but a technology company that I have known and respected for a long time basically put out a public email to announce to 20,000 people that they're going to be out of a job. Now, call me crazy, but I think that's not the way you treat people. And if you treat your employees like that, what happens with customers? So I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to know what you think. What I just try to do is I say to myself, yes, I want to automate some things, but I still, people buy from people, so I always want to be cultivating that relationship with Barb. I know when the companies get bigger, we lose sight of that. Oh my gosh, I think we need to bring it back. I think people are just being tired of being treated like a number.
And I think that's in every aspect of our life now. I think that's partially why social is. I like to say it's the power of social, because now we have a chance to voice that, right? So like the employees have a chance to voice their
That's true.
pleasure, and customers and consumers. We keep talking about, if you didn't care about the customer before because they could only post to Yelp, and Yelp was, at the beginning. Now, someone that has a blog, or someone that even gets something with the right hashtag and has no followers, can say a comment or bring something up, and that customer is going to be just as important as one that has 100,000 followers. And if we focus on, I use the hashtag, and it came out of just my conversations, was show you care. And if we find ways to show you care across no matter what we're doing, that's the key. But the scale question is a tough one. I think Rachel knows that. We're all kind of dealing with the, how can we keep being human while we keep adding on more tasks? And there's lots of I think aspects where we can increase automation. I use more automation than probably most people do, but I don't automate anything that comes out of my handles that is engaging human to human. And I believe that's important, but at some time I might run out of time, and there might be a time where I might change that philosophy. And hopefully that's not the case. But Rachel, I think we have 5 minutes left on that aspect. Barb, this was, I really appreciate your time, and I think we can definitely do this again. The shout out to Social Employee, Sheryl Burgess's book, and really that was a big one from my perspective. But maybe for the last 5 minutes there, who's someone that you're following that maybe we don't know of, or a book that you're reading that maybe someone out there can kind of help them kind of take the next step in what they're doing in the social selling or social or even leadership?
Are you asking me or Rachel?
We'll go with you first, Barb.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if you want to go with me because I read so many books. Well, you mentioned Chris Brogan, and one of his books that I love is The Freak Show, Inherit the Earth. I just love that whole notion that we are, right? We are us Inc., right? I'm
Yes.
Barb Inc., you're Brian Inc., whatever.
I'm a proud freak. Yes.
And so that's one recent. Actually, truth be told, over the weekend I started reading a biography about John D. Rockefeller. So when I read as much about things that have happened in history, because I think many things that have happened in history have a lot of implications for us today. On the sales side, Aaron Ross's Predictable Revenue, I thought that was really good, and he mixed in some elements, of the social side of it. But on any given day, I'm reading John Doerr's Insight Selling. I'm always reading something on sales, marketing, social media, that kind of thing. The last thing I want to say about the whole human thing is, it's something you said earlier in the beginning, Brian, and I remember saying this to my peer management team when I was still in corporate. And one of the teams wasn't doing very well, and that manager's answer was just to basically beat on them more, make them work harder, push harder hours, do this, do that. My belief is if you take care of the people, they take care of you. And I think when corporations make the decision to really embody that attitude, because companies like Zappos are doing it, I think that's when we really start to see some real change that we need, because we have some systemic problems, I believe, across business today that need some real change in thinking and attitude. So.
I love it. I saw Rachel drop John Golden's book there on the Twitter chat. Rachel, do you have other books or recommendations for us before we end today's chat?
Well, if you haven't, I'm going to do a little personal plug and check out the Pipeliner blog.
There you go.
Allison Stone, our director of content,
soon to be a
amazing
book, right? Soon to be a book.
from all of the thought leaders and influencers in our space. So it's a daily great read. And then definitely John Golden's book. It's the best one I've read this year. Highly actionable.
John has done a really good job, and it's so funny. I remember meeting him in person 3 years ago at the Sales 2.0 conference. We were both speakers, and just have always gotten along really well. I was taking a look at my list. I was also going to tell you we talked, Brian, about experience. So Chief Customer Office from Gene Bliss is really, really good.
Ooh, I haven't heard that one. I'm going to have to add that one.
And so that's really good. And then also business model generation is another one that I've been digging into, which is really pretty cool because it helps to define what it means to create a business model. And they actually went a little further and created a book called Business Model U. So that kind of goes along with Brogan and the Freaks thing. It helps you to determine, if you're going to create a business or you're going to go reinvent your career, it gives you kind of the 9 pillars of what you need to think about. So literally I can show you this list. Starts to get pretty long.
Hey, look at you, overachiever.
And you can't see in the background, but my office is lined, this whole wall is books. I'm just a book freak. So
you need to take a screen share so we can feed that to the chat.
I'll take a shot because, when you think about learning, I'm always reading a couple books every week. And even just doing that, think about how much you can learn every year. So.
Yeah, we just had a couple people in the chat. I was doing the same thing, trying to take notes here of what books. So we'll add the books to kind of the recap of, and we'll share out of the books we kind of talked about. And one that I can give a plug to that I got a pre-release copy of, and it just came out. It says August 2014, but it's from Dion Keeson Liu. I always miss. She's from Australia, and it's The Social Executive: How to Master Social Media and Why It's Good for Your Business. I absolutely love this book. It really talks about personal branding and how you can make your boss look good. I think which is a valuable tool to have in our toolkit because
we used to call that managing up.
Managing up, yes, managing up. Or I often said someone would have told me, they'd ask me how I got promoted so fast. I was like, well, I made my boss look so good, he got promoted, and I took his place. It's easier said than done. But we will kind of add the books to the list here after the chat, and really do appreciate Barb for jumping in here, and sorry for the I would say Friday the 13th, but social selling hour, the 13th glitches we've had. It's been
extra fun.
Yeah, it has. It adds a little joy to the day, and a quick shout out to, we had so many great people on Twitter today, across the board, from Richard Young and Andrew Jenkins. Terry has done some great tweets on there, and I will make sure that I kind of go through from the Storyfy perspective. But as we're kind of leaving, I guess one of the things that I think we've been hearing a lot of, and I know, Barb, you were part of that the social selling ebook that was kind of created from across the pond, I like to say, for sure.
Oh yeah, that's Michael.
Yes, from Michael. I think that's something that we kind of have to remember as kind of, I guess, my closing for this social selling hour is that we had a 33-page social selling ebook created all via emails and a couple of Skypes and Hangouts from people around the world, and I think that just demonstrates to me more than what the lessons were in the book, because there's some tons of great lessons, but the idea that we can collaborate and learn no matter where someone's at, no matter what your job is. If your boss isn't, investing in your training, invest in yourself. Create ways to learn and collaborate across the globe, and I think that is too often underestimated. And that book to me was just like the perfect example of how just people coming together, everyone wanting to give, and the other book on my mantle there, because I think that's kind of important as we go. So, Barb, I'll give you the last word as we kind of go out, and I do greatly appreciate you for joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you both, Brian and Rachel. One thing that's really fun about this is the three of us, have conversed over social, and now I feel like at least I'm getting a chance to meet you a little more personally. And then I happen to notice, Brian, the iSocial plate in the background. Arizona?
Yes.
Is that where you live?
I am. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Which is where I'm from, so small world.
Wow, very small world.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the last word is You know, I really enjoyed this. I think it's so amazing that we have the opportunity to help support and collaborate with each other. You don't have to be a big business to be a global presence. And the fact that we can all work together and collaborate and help each other and share ideas and change the world, in my opinion, is a really cool thing. So thanks so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. See you next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.